I went to an ivory tower 15 years ago, and when I left that ivory tower 15 years ago, that ivory tower had the lowest employment rate 1 year after graduation of any university in the UK. So, to hopefully teach us how, I mean, those who couldn't get a sort of a sinecure in the Conservative Party in the UK ended up floating around the Global Art Forum. Ayesha Khanna, who is, amongst many other things, the CEO of Technology Quotient, an advisor of the Singapore's Ministry of Education, and the founder of 21st Century Girls, is hopefully going to explain to us how the next generation can avoid all that fate.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Is it okay if I just sit down? Okay, great. So my talk today is about education, the future of education. And here's the paradox. On the one hand, technology is automating jobs. And on the other hand, we see in the news every day that our governments, our schools, our parents, we're all trying to teach our kids more technology. And we have to find the right balance between the two if we want to have the right kind of education and we want our kids to have jobs in the future. First, let me introduce you to some friends. This is Baxter. He costs $25,000, which is about the income of a production factory employee in the US. He's really popular because he's cheap at $25,000. He's one of the cheapest manufacturing robots in the world. He's extremely agile. He can do different things. You can reprogram him. He has a face and expressions. So actually factory workers don't mind working with him. And for the first time, we have someone who can work in a factory who doesn't get tired, who doesn't get sick, who doesn't age. And more factories are employing Baxter. Here's the thing, more small, medium enterprises are employing Baxter. So he's just not for GE. He's also for, if I started a company, I could start one in the US. That's one of the reasons why the US might well get back into the manufacturing game again. This is Da Vinci. He's $1.75 million. 70% of prostate surgeries in the US are carried out with Da Vinci. He's not an autonomous robot. All robots don't necessarily mean that they act on their own. In fact, he helps the surgeon identify and understand where to do incisions. He's expensive, but more and more, he's a doctor's helper. This is Atlas. He's 6 feet tall, 220 pounds of pure muscle, iron muscle. And he was developed by DARPA. He was developed after the Fukushima disaster. And 5 companies, 5 different academic departments competed for the best robot that would come and rescue people who are under debris. So if some disaster happens, don't be surprised if he shows up. This is Paro. Paro is $5,000. Paro was developed in Japan. Paro is a furry seal and is very popular when it was tested in nursing homes in America. And basically, it has sensors. So if you tickle it under the ear, it will purr and turn its face towards you. It's responsive. And when Sherry Turkle did some research on Paro, she found that grandchildren were very disturbed by it, unlike parents. Parents were fine, you know, mommy and daddy don't have time to look after their own parents. They hand over Paro. But the grandchild comes back and says, but mommy, grandma loves Paro more than she loves me. So they understand, children understand there's a real emotional connection that can happen with these robots. And then there's Jibo. Jibo just raised $25 million in January. It's called the first home family robot. It's a tiny robot. It can help you, remind you about recipes. It can take selfies. In fact, they shouldn't be called selfies anymore because it can actually take pictures at birthday parties. You just say, hey, Jibo, take a picture. It'll take a picture. It'll recognize you. It'll remind you when you have an email, birthdays, girlfriends, presents. What we're seeing right now is more and more of such robots taking over jobs that were done by humans. You may think it's only for the low-level jobs, except the doctor that I mentioned. But how about her? Do you know her? Her name is Hatsune Miku. She has sold out concerts in Japan, 160,000 at this concert. She's 6 feet tall. She wears a little skirt. She never ages. She has long, long blue hair. She is a virtual pop star, and she's very, very famous. So they're becoming, again, if not autonomously creative, the interesting thing here is that people are not really able to tell the difference and frankly don't really care. They love to see her. Now, University of Oxford, they did a study. And they said 47% of jobs will be automated. As you can see, dentists, there's a very low probability. I guess people don't trust anyone else in their mouths. But actors are in high demand. But after that, economists, there's a 40% probability that economists will be replaced by robots. Telemarketers, technical writers, commercial pilots, well, a lot of planes are already autonomously flown. So what's going to happen? Well, here's the thing. People tell you, you'll hear it all over the place, we don't believe in automation. We love people. Do you think CEOs love people? Look at Terry Gu. He is a Chinese billionaire and CEO of Foxconn. As you know, they create all the Apple iPads, iPhones. And he said, and he's not a very diplomatic person, that as human beings are also animals, to manage 1 million animals gives me a headache. A terrible thing to say, seriously. And in fact, he has therefore ordered 1 million robots because people were so unhappy where he was at his factories that they were actually committing suicide. There are actually more than 1 million robots in the world. There are more robots than there are Estonians in the world, actually. And they're increasing every day, with China being one of the highest buyers of robots. So here's the deal. What does that mean for education? I just showed you so many jobs that are going to be taken over by robots. People come to me all the time, say, shall I put my child in a coding class? Should they really be studying Dostoevsky? Should they really be taking an art class? Well, as far as coding is concerned, and by the way, the answer to Dostoevsky and art is a resounding yes, and I'll talk about that. But it's not so much whether they should learn coding or not. They should learn technology, but it is more about how they should learn it. So I would say no, don't make them learn technology if you're going to put them in a class where they're just going to learn the syntax, when they learn the grammar, but not the concept. Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee wrote a fantastic book called Race Against the Machine. And in that, they pointed out the rapid automation of jobs. And they said that in the future, ideas will be the real scarce inputs, scarcer than both labor and capital. And it is usually creative people, writers, artists. We have lots of ideas. And there will never be more demand for ideas and creativity than in the 21st century. So what does this mean for education? Everybody talks about STEM. STEM this, STEM that. Let's do more STEM in Dubai. Let's do more STEM in Singapore, more STEM in America. Well, really, the right term is not STEM. It's STEAM. And STEAM was a new concept that was thought of by Brown University. You've got to love Brown. They always come up with the best things. And A is for arts. It's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And there's another thing about education. It's about innovation. Innovation occurs when academia meets industry in an applied learning environment. Why is this important? What happened in the Industrial Revolution? Why did we have to shutter our children into schools that happened to open at the same time that factories did and closed at the same times that mummies and daddies could come home? Why did we make them sit in these like lines, rows upon rows, and make them study and memorize things? Well, now that age is gone. Now this artificial divide between academia and industry can now finally die the death it should have died a long time ago. Applied learning is when children try to create things because they find something interesting, puzzling, paradoxical in the world, and they're creative, and they apply theoretical knowledge, and that's when innovation happens. So you'll hear this word a lot about, we want our students to be innovative and creative and entrepreneurial. The only way to do that is to expose them to the real world, not theoretical projects. So where is this happening? Is this happening in, I don't know, San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, in Paris, in London, Tel Aviv? It's really not happening anywhere. So I usually go to a country where you have no natural resources, your land mass is kind of small. All you really have is your people. If I could find a country like that, I bet I'd see that they've been thinking about this problem quite seriously. Well, that place is Singapore. Singapore is always thinking about the future. It's paranoid about the future. Really, it's an interesting quality they have. And I like it because I've been exposed to the Ministry of Education. My husband and I moved with our children to Singapore 2.5 years ago. And I had been writing on the future of skills for a long time. And then one day I got a letter from the Ministry of Education and they said, we've been studying the future and we think we need to change our education system. We think that industry and education is too far divorced from each other because innovation is happening far faster because of technology in industry. And they invited me and I joined the steering committee with all the heads of all the big agencies and corporations in Singapore. And we went to Switzerland, and we went to Germany, and they went to New Zealand and Australia to look at all the apprenticeship programs there. And they were so disciplined. You know, the minister would be up at 6 and get on the bus, and we would all go. And we came back, and they decided that study-work integration was really the key. So they encourage now more and more with a program called Skills Future that all students in colleges must spend time in corporations, organizations. They must have applied education. This means that if you are doing design, architecture, robotics, it's not a theoretical project. Deal with it in a real-world environment where there are real-world problems, where you have to think on your feet and you actually are truly creative because you are prototyping and tinkering. And they called it Paths for Progress Built on Skills. So I went with them everywhere, and I would always raise my hand. I kind of became known as the person. After a while, they just turned around because they knew I'd raise the question. And I always asked 2 questions. One was, where are the women? Because there were never enough women in all these high-tech, futuristic companies. And the other was, why are we not taking this to schools? Why are we underestimating the children? It's like we underestimate old people. Why is that? Why is there a perfect band in your 20s when you can be high-tech and cool, or maybe in your 30s? But if you're older and younger, then you're kind of either too young or too old, and you're just patronized by society. This is very, very bad. Especially as we know with rejuvenation technologies, we will probably all live to be a lot longer and all look quite young and wonderful. So it is my contention that this paradigm of applied learning and creative technology needs to start at a much younger age. So I began to think. I left, the committee, it finished, they gave their proposals, true to their Singaporean efficiency. They have now implemented everything. They work better than Goldman Sachs. It's very impressive. And I thought we have to do something for high school kids. How about we just destroy this ivory tower? How about we think of school in a truly disruptive way, and we think of school not as this international school or this local school that exists in isolation, but one that is a node in a network, one that's connected to great entrepreneurs, great companies like Twitter or Facebook or art galleries or the Singapore Repertory Theatre, and is always in conversation with them and designs the curriculum with them. And what if the whole core was applied learning? There are all kinds of pedagogies. There's inquiry-based pedagogy. There is problem-based, project-based. All of these pedagogies are important, but I believe that for the future, applied learning is the key because of the necessity of having exposure to industry innovation first. And the real reason is because innovation moves much faster in the industrial sector. And what we're really trying to say is that there is a gap between theory and reality. I have some students at the moment. They are brilliant. They are brilliant in a very academic sense. They all got 45 out of 45 in IB. That's actually very good. I didn't realize that. And they're all national tennis players and cricketers and gymnasts, and they're very creative. But when I asked them what they wanted to do, they all said, we want to go into banking. And I couldn't understand that. And I said, but what about something else? And then they said, then we'll go into tech, Google and Facebook and Twitter. Those are the three things that they think about. They have no exposure. They have no idea. One of them wants to go to law school. She got into Cambridge Law. And I told her, what is the future of law? And she said, I don't know, it's precedents and court cases. I said, are you going to study data science? Because all precedents will be done by robots. In fact, Blackstone Discovery can do it much faster than any associate in the world. And she'd never thought about that. Why don't we tell our kids that? Because we want to protect them from the future? I really don't understand. And really what it means is that they would pay less attention to memorizing or to getting their grades and much more attention on being creative. They might take that literature class more seriously. They might actually do drama. The best student in my class is the president of the drama club. He's so good at communication. His body language is great. He's very creative in all the answers that he gives. So creativity must be brought up. And the only way that kids and parents see the value of that is when you map out an applied learning future for them. How about results? I don't know in Dubai, but in Singapore, and in Asia in general. I grew up in Pakistan, then I went to the US, then I went to London, then I went to Singapore. But academic achievement is very, very important. You have to get your A's. Really? Do you really need to get those 6 A's? Or would you rather get those 5 A's and also have done something in which you achieve mastery? In colleges, people don't even pay attention, admissions counselors, to SATs. They want to know if you've done something different. The oral tradition is very important. And the reason is because technology is just another language for expressing your creativity, just like anything else. So when children tell me that they've come up with a mathematical solution, I tell them to tell me in English, or draw it, or dance it, or dramatize it. Do something that shows me you understand its nuances. They're not used to that. But they pick up quite quickly. And by the way, these are older kids. The children are great at it. Like my daughter's 5. She could dance her way through math all day long. It's when they get older that we've stifled it already in them. So it's really important. And then market validation is, again, important, exposing them to the real world. We don't want them to because they'll fail. So I'll show you later on one of the things that we do. But the idea is that if there was a regional network of academies, and we're launching this in July this year in Singapore, so I'm very excited about it. We put together a plan of this new kind of after-school enrichment hub where you can provide a new paradigm of education. We plan to have it all over the world. And what do we really teach? We say it's not how to code, but how to create with code. This kid, does he look like a nerdy programmer who'll never succeed, who'll be at some back office, always shy? He's the first guy to hit on your girlfriend. He's confident. He's Estonian, right? And in Estonia, it says, I know Java. What do you know? Right? Estonia teaches kids coding right in primary school. And they do it with confidence and with creativity. This is one example of how applied learning looks in action. You start with a course on 3D printing. It's not a course on 3D printing. Who cares about 3D printing? It's product design, okay? You send your kids to 3D printing, it doesn't matter. What they should learn is how do you design a great product, and that's about art and design. Then we move them over to design thinking and financial management. What would you do? Where would you make it? Do you know what new supply chains look like? Would it be in China? Could you have Baxter do it? Why shouldn't our high school kids be thinking about this? And then finally, put it on Etsy, put it on Shapeways. Go and see, does it sell? Just because you like an idea doesn't mean it will sell in the future. There are infinite opportunities for these students to go ahead and on these platforms create new products and services. The sooner they learn, the better they will be, because everyone will be an entrepreneur in the future. And finally, the best of them win an internship at a leading design firm. We are already having partnerships with some of the leading technology, financial, advertising, legal firms in the world, the ones that are the most innovative. The last thing that I want to talk about is ethics. Anybody who's been through the pain of a PhD, as I'm going through, would know there's a lot that we talk about the politics and the ethics that's embedded in technology design. It's really important to have a holistic view of what happens when you use technology, when you design, when you create. Because it's not just like making a piece of art or writing a book. It actually has sensors, it has different elements in it, it can invade people's privacy, it can be a security hazard. And so it's very, very important to teach kids early on. For primary school kids, we always teach them, would you make your friend do bad things? Then don't make your robot do bad things either. And so you can just imagine if that was taught to them from an early age onwards, it's a very proactive, positive relationship with technology, but it's also one that's in control, that's always looking to put floors at any danger. It is yin and yang when it comes to technology. So that's all I have for the future of education is applied and creative, and I hope you enjoyed the talk.
We've got time for some questions. Do we have any questions?
I tweeted this one, but why do you think that there's still such a distinction between the science and the arts, between what we consider creativity to be in the first place?
I think it's just a terrible institutionalized process that was set early on in schools. What happens is they did a survey in Singapore and they found that out of all the teachers, they asked them all, how many of you read the newspaper every day? And 50% of the teachers who actually teach science bother to read the newspaper and keep up with the latest in science. Almost 90% of those who teach literature and arts keep up with it. And so they actually end up knowing a lot more what's happening in the world and in technology than the science teachers. And it happens at the school level. We just kind of kill it. That's the idea that the truth, there is no truth. It's dynamic when it comes to science. True scientists know that science is an art. But when you're a school teacher, you think that's it, and you become lazy. And you can't allow that as a parent, even as a citizen that depends on these future generations for our country and society. We have to shake it up, and we have to make them think that science is not a static thing, not a static discipline. And that requires a lot of institutional change.
If nobody else has a question, I do. So if you talk about embedding ethics in technology and in design, and yet the only CEO apart from your wonderful self that you put on this screen is somebody who's just bought 1 million robots because his workers are committing suicide and that's a pain in the neck. How good do you think today's entrepreneurs are? Because my feeling is that there's been a really big shift from a kind of an open, socially minded, liberal approach to technology which emerges out of the 70s San Francisco that we all dream about. And today's San Francisco, which is broadly antisocial, libertarian, very egotistical. You're talking about not training a new generation, but reversing a major trend, it seems to me. Do you agree?
Well, look, those people who, when the web was born with Tim Berners-Lee, he has the same attitude. The spirit of the web is very open source. It is to be extremely inclusive. And it is all about, I think, morals and ethics are very important. That's why Tim Berners-Lee actually never became a corporate entity, right? He's still at MIT. And he has the World Wide Web Foundation. Now, you're right, we do see a number of companies, because of this vicious cycle of funding, and as a result, high valuations, and this desire to get more and more people onto the platform, that sometimes don't care as much about the issues with privacy, the issues with manipulation that we see in technology. We've just seen the beginning of this. So Jeremy Bailenson is a friend who teaches at Stanford. He has a virtual interaction lab. And I'll never forget when we went to see him, he showed us a laboratory in which, with virtual reality, he would put it on children, and they would see this virtual reality of themselves swimming with dolphins. And after a while, he would go back to them after a day or two and say, do you remember when we swam with dolphins? And they would say yes. They really believed it. What I'm saying is false memories can be implanted in people. And we know that virtual reality is going to become a huge part of our lives. So there are bigger issues that we'll face in the future. And how do we change the current approach that Silicon Valley has? I think there are people over there who are discussing this, who are bringing it up. But I don't think it's so much a possibility to reverse what we have currently as much as to embed this new kind of thinking with the new generation of technologists that is coming up.
First, thank you for a wonderful talk. Yeah. What's your experience traveling around the world and meeting with the educators and the scientists? Are countries or ministries inclined to completely decompose their educational systems and make something that is contemporary and relevant? Because I know some data that I received from some thinkers in the education of the future, they said that the PhD programs were formed 650 years ago, and nothing has changed since. And our, high school education was formed some 200 years ago, and nothing has changed. And we live in a time where reality is shaping in front of our eyes with the speed of light. So I just want to know how much they realize that the most important thing we need to do in the world is to change education now and completely. Yeah.
I think that's a really good question. Many countries are coming to this realization, but many countries can't do anything about it. So the US has come to this realization, but it's very hard for it to reach every single school in the public sector. Singapore is an exception because they're a small country. Estonia is an exception. Israel is trying to do the same thing, but they have the ecosystem of technology already there with its entrepreneurs. The challenge is the teachers, really. That's what it comes down to. So if you look at Singapore, they are trying to bring computer science into the schools. And it's not easy to do that because a lot of the teachers, A, haven't studied computer science. B, if they've studied it in this horrible way where they find it tedious, boring, and challenging, and they conflate all of these things. So in the end, they think programming is this awful thing. So the first thing that I do when I do teacher training is say, separate boring with challenging. I can fix the boring, and challenging you might not hate as much when it's fun and interactive. So for Singapore, they're trying to take their math teachers and train them in computer science. Because at the end of the day, the person who has the most interaction with your child is the teacher. Now you may say, well, can we automate teachers? To some degree, we can. So in Korea, for kindergarten teachers, there's a new kind of robot called Enki, and there are thousands of them they're putting in preschools. Sugata Mitra has said, you don't even need teachers at all. We can teach each other with the internet as a teacher. So what we'll see is this ground-up initiative with parents, with students, just learning from each other. I think that's what's going to make a difference. We cannot rely on bureaucracies to be as agile and quick. You'll see companies such as the ones that I'm starting beginning to take on these new, different ways of thinking.
Last question.
Okay. Oddly enough, I'm one of the academics who gives workshops to high school students in Singapore. I'm from the US. And what I find sad is that we only have this workshop with elite schools. And your program, is it applied all over Singapore, or is it the same 2 or 3 elite schools that are always approached?
That's such a good question. It's a question I struggle with every time. So the Academy is an after-school program. To get the best teachers, it is a premium program that people have to pay for. But I have a nonprofit called 21st Century Girls, and in that we provide free technology to girls in Singapore. And I think that option is always there for students now. So there is the opportunity to get premium education, but there are many nonprofits, such as those such as 21C Girls, that provide education. The difference in our nonprofit is it's completely applied. So the girls come in, and we don't talk to them, this is a conditional if-else syntax. What we say is, do you know what conditionals are in respect of a self-driving car? Do you know what a drone is? This is how we'll teach you loops. Look at this girl. She is a programmer at Instagram. This is what she looks at with the world. These are the challenges that she has. This is the career that she'll have. It's very applied. And when it's applied, people really respond to it. So I think that what you find is, and this is again, this is the difference between good education and poorly designed education, is that there's a lot of information out there, and the challenge is to find the right one for the students. And I would say the key is look for that which is most applied in nature.
Thank you, Ayesha, very much for a fabulous talk. Please.
Thank you so much.